All right, Mr. Brad Shepard, welcome on to the Beyond the Trek Fireside Chat and Podcast.
Hey, man, thanks for having me on. This is awesome. I appreciate the opportunity.
This has been a long time coming. I know you guys gave me the awesome opportunity to sit on your guys' podcast, the No One Fights Alone, and we've been trying to schedule this for quite some time, and life just keeps getting in the way. So I'm super excited that we're able to do this.
Hey, yours was a big hit. We got some really good feedback on that conversation. It was really good. Of course, you have a great message. I mean, the Beyond the Trek is a really you've got a good thing going on there.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm excited to dive into what you guys have going on too. And one of the things we've kind of been starting these off with and capitalizing with is how we met with people, and really trying to, I guess stigma is maybe not the right word, but throw it out there that these big influencers that have podcasts that have hundreds of thousands of followers, you'd be surprised on who gets back to you when you send a message. And we got connected through Dario Giomi, who's a good friend of both of ours.
Right.
And
great guy.
Him and I were having coffee over Christmas, and he said, "Hey, you got to call this guy Brad." And man, gave you a call, and we figured out we had a lot in common, and figured out that we had a lot of mutually supporting efforts and things that we're doing in like our post-career lives. And it's been awesome to see like where it's going,
I think one of the coolest things about working in this space is finding people who share your passion and kind of vision for helping others and keeping people on track. It is just such a reward of being in this community to meet people who share that. I get to meet a lot of great people around, you being one of them. I get to meet some incredible people all the time. It's a true blessing to get to be a part of this, and hopefully make an impact and save some lives, man.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I always give credit to Denny Calero. He told me this saying, and I think I said it on your guys' podcast too, but you made a good point there where you're like, hey, the thing that I'm moving away from, and I know we're going to talk about it, and the thing I'm doing in post, your post-police life and everything else is a lot of people tend to try and stay really close to those communities because you feel like that's exactly what you know. But Denny's saying is the team room or the briefing room, right, is always bigger on the outside.
Right.
Your connections and your network is always bigger than you think it is.
Right. Yeah. I'm really amazed sometimes. And last week I was up at Washington DC at National Police Week, and that may date our podcast, by the way. But the getting to see people from all over the United States that I've gotten to meet. I've been to Police Week, I don't know, years. I took a break, and that's my first time back since 2019. And just to get to connect with these people again just is amazing and humbling. You're like, how am I part of this community, this circle? Very, very grateful to be able to be a part of that.
All right. Well, let me go ahead and give you a proper introduction here for what I've got. So for everybody that's listening today, we got retired Captain Brad Shepard. He's currently the Director of Public Safety for Chateau Health and Wellness, a national first responder residential treatment facility that treats trauma, suicide, PTSD, substance abuse, and depression and anxiety. Brad retired after 25 years from the Oklahoma Highway Patrol as a commander and served in a variety of assignments, including tactical team, bomb squad, special operations, Oklahoma Homeland Security, as well as a member and later commander of the agency peer support group. Brad is also the founder and former CEO and the executive director of two separate nonprofit organizations, not that you have enough going on already, that served in the first responder wellness community. He's an experienced national presenter and instructor in a variety of disciplines, including ICISF, critical incident stress management, and Brad has faced his own challenges of stress, trauma, mental health, and alcoholism, as well as significant levels of betrayal, which gives him the passion to help others find the peace and joy they desire in their personal lives, their relationships, and their careers. So I'm super
I should have
excited.
Scaled that back a little bit.
Hey, wait, and now we're good, man. It's big now.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't. I just copy and pasted that off of a deal I sent to an agency. I should have scaled that back. I didn't realize you were gonna have to. You're reading it the whole thing. No, thank you for that. Yeah, it sounds really good. And you know what? The reality is, I did have a cool career. I really did have a cool career. I just never said no when somebody showed up and said, "Hey, you want to come work for me?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." There's two types of people: people who embrace change and people who really don't care for change. I'm a change guy, man. Just grow me, stretch me. Let's see what we can do and go have some fun. I just never told people no if they wanted me to come work for me. And then I carried that, through my retirement into my. I'm not actually retired. It's a misnomer of sorts. I'm too young to retire. But I'm retired
Okay.
from carrying a gun as a part of the job. I carry a gun for fun now.
Well, I'm excited to dive into that. Let's go ahead and dive into it. Let's hear where you grew up, how you even got into what you're doing now.
Oh man, that's a cool story too. So I grew up a farm kid out in western Oklahoma. I grew up as a dairy farm ranch kid, running cattle, cutting wheat, running dairy cattle. Man, I was in grade school before I figured out other kids didn't get up at 6:30 in the morning or 6 a.m. and 5:30 in the morning. Just I grew up working hard and not resenting it. My dad was like, and I worked alongside my dad, which was the coolest thing ever. I just really enjoyed that. And fast forward, had a three older sisters. I was a spoiled brat in that capacity, but I learned how to work hard, which carried over into my my work life later as a trooper. But um, I I went to college. My first year in college, I took a course called Ag Econ, and I had every intention of going back and working alongside my dad as a farm kid. And when I took that Ag Econ course, man, the numbers just didn't work. And as a consequence, I had a conversation with my dad, and he's like, "Well, sounds like you need to, hit your knees and start praying about that and figure out where you want to go and what you want to do." And there's a lot to that story as well. We'll spare the listeners that, but the true result of that is becoming a law enforcement officer, and specifically an Oklahoma Highway Patrol officer. 36 positions, and there was that year I applied, there was almost 4,000 applicants for 36 positions. I have no idea how I made it, but I made it. And, that was in 1992, and graduated and went straight to the Eastern Oklahoma as a young trooper. It's hard to believe that at age 23, I was out there, serving the great state of Oklahoma, because I was, skinny run of a kid, just out there trying to do my thing. And I spent almost 4 years in Eastern Oklahoma, which is pretty rough. It's a really, really rough area, especially in the early 90s. And I got to experience probably a ridiculous amount of interactions with just crazy stuff. I fighting, kicking, gouging, chasing, getting shot at. I was blessed in my career never to have to take a life, but I got shot at plenty. And, just that was that. And my ex-wife, my wife then, and we were just decided that's not a place where we want to raise kids. We want to start a family. And so we moved back to Western Oklahoma, and very, very close to Oklahoma City, central Oklahoma. And that was where I lived the remainder of my career. However, I was close enough to Oklahoma City headquarters unit that I could, and they used nautical miles. So if you were within a certain distance, you could work out of that headquarters unit. So I was in the field as a field trooper, but then I got the opportunity to serve in a variety of capacities out of headquarters. Tactical team, which is our SWAT unit, later on full-time bomb squad position, full-time special operations position, full-time Homeland Security position. Yeah, and went back to the tactical team and started getting promoted through the ranks of tactical team. At one point, I was full-time TAC team guy. Our TAC team is a collateral position, so it's the large majority of them are not full-time positions, a call-out basis. And then probably, I was 13 years on. I'd been, doing my thing, having a good time. Just never had any desire to get promoted until I reached about year 13. And that was within the tactical team leadership that I saw a need and a gap that I could fill, and started getting promoted there. And ultimately got promoted to commander, which I'm really, really proud of. It's pretty hard to get promoted to a command position, and I loved being a commander. Absolutely loved being a commander. You just kind of got to set the tone and mood for, your whatever respective entity you had. I got to had some pretty head scratcher opportunities, if you will. They were rough. I had to redid a couple units. I'm a big group dynamics and leadership studier and cultural studier of trying to make sure that your unit is healthy and sustainable. So I learned a lot, and I think we were early on. Well, I said early on a while ago. I just never said no. Um, One of the other things that I never said no to was other people's wisdom. So I leaned a lot. I don't want any of this to think that I dreamed this up or I was just had this, epiphany of leadership knowledge. I really spent time listening to people who had been before me. Some things that I didn't agree with. I would make sure I didn't do those things. Some things that I did agree with, I'm like, I want to emulate that guy. I want to make sure that I can model I can't be the same because I'm not that guy, but I certainly emulate conceptually some of the things that he or she was doing. I just paid attention, and I think that in small part well, no, not small part. I think in a large part actually played into the success that I had as a commander. And yeah, that's that I use the metaphor a lot of a resume when I do my public speaking and do my trainings and presentations of the resume. Everybody makes their resume look really good. You want to put your best foot forward and make it look really good. And I tell people that front side of that resume is where you have an opportunity to brag on yourself and highlight some of the really great things that you did or had happen to you. But the backside of the resume, the metaphor I use is the backside of the resume is a lot of the stuff that we don't talk about or we don't tell people, or that things that happen to us or that we experienced that are, just not very pleasant and arguably, traumatic or highly negatively stressful to us. And I talk a lot about, the backside of my resume was pretty dark. I just didn't pay much attention to it. I just really didn't, I just thought this is just the way of life that everybody gets shot at or has people show up on their doorstep wanting to kill them. Everybody has that, don't they? If you're in Copville, well, no, some do, but not everybody does. So that's when I started learning about chronic stress and chronic PTSD. I finished out my career with a lot in my bucket, a lot of shit in my bucket. I lost several significant partners. The first one I lost was in 1999. It was a SWAT operation, attack team operation that I wasn't on. And I didn't really think I had the right to even speak to it. For a lot of years. I had survivor guilt because I wasn't there. I felt like, that's part of that ego thing. You feel like if I'd have been there, he'd be alive today. And he passed September 24th, 1999, Rocky. And I carried a lot of survivor guilt about that and didn't tell anybody for a long time. It was a long time. I just kept that to myself. Didn't feel like I had the right to speak to it, and a lot of hurt and pain inwardly. And then I lost two more partners. Really good friend, one of them, and then another one was a mentee of mine. Really good young kid, and those were heavy. So I carried those throughout the career. I knew it'd kind of mess with me. I knew I had the makings of some PTSD, and so I went and sought help for those, and had some therapists do some EMDR work. It doesn't ever go away. You just find a better place to park it in your anatomy, and as a consequence of that, I started getting involved in the peer support program as a collateral duty. So just kind of off over here to the side, in addition to what I was doing on a daily basis, I was having these conversations. What I found was that God had really given me a gift to be able to speak truth, active listen to somebody who's in a space of hurting, and then provide them either truth back or an opportunity to minimize the shame and the stigma of their being in a unhealthy space. So the latter part of my career, I started getting involved in the peer program. And then as I got promoted, I started getting more heavily involved in the peer program. So at one point, I was a commander over the peer support program. I grew it from 2 people to when I retired, I think we had just a little over 60 people, both sworn and non-sworn individuals in our agency assigned to the peer program that were doing intervention work and peer support work and teachings and trainings on wellness and resiliency. So really proud of that. Really, that's um, a point of pride for me that I can say I was in that space and had a lot of opportunities to make an impact and make a difference in people's lives, hopefully make their career better, but hopefully make their homes lives better. So yeah, that's the quick part of my career. That's what was that 5 minute version?
Hey, that's okay. I got a lot of stuff came out of that I want to ask. The first thing being,
Sure.
we align a lot with, resiliency culture and things like that. So the one question I want to ask is, when you first became a commander and took over like that program and you focused on culture, what was your plan, right? Like what kind of culture did you want to present, and did that change over time after you started to lose people? And I think maybe to more direct that in is, we're seeing it a lot now with culture of like breaking the stigma, right? Of people
Right.
asking for help and
Right.
things like that. So I'm interested to know, what kind of things did you bring to the table early on in your career?
Well, I think that's a great question because I changed two units. I was involved in healing 3 different units. 2 of those units were dramatically horrible cultures. And I don't want to get into the details because that would
Yeah.
it's truth is truth, but it would openly disparage some people, and I don't think that's necessary. But just know that both of those cultures were really, one was a field command. It was actually my first field command, and the commander was just horrible. He was just horrible. And I know that leaves a lot of blankness for the listeners, but just know that people were afraid to speak. They were afraid to do. They were afraid to act. They were afraid to mess up. It was a very fear driven culture. And there was retaliation. There was disparagement. There was just a lot of negativity. So to answer and to build that up, the second unit, I was asked by the chief to come heal that unit. I was specifically asked, okay, what you did at the first one, I see. The second one was going back to my tactical unit and healing. They had really done. There was some guys that had really, they were out of hand. These were egos that were out of hand, in essence, of what it was. I mean, these are tip of the spear guys. I mean, you put them in an environment of of SWAT, an operational environment, and they're some of the best. But you give them time off, and they're just knuckleheads. There was some lack of accountability. There was lack of direction. There was lack of purpose. So both of those units, to answer your question, because I've kind of built those two up. I love talking about this because what I did, I intentionally stepped back and made a culture change plan. I didn't go into it haphazardly. Like I called some commander friends that I respected well and went and sat down with them and said, here's what I have. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's my plan. What are your thoughts? And I got some really good feedback, arguably criticism and support for here's what I would do. Here's where I would go. And here's how I would handle that. The first one, it was a specific plan on revamping the culture to a positive environment, open door policy, ensuring that I checked in with all of my troopers, my staff, sworn and non-sworn staff quarterly. I want to hear from you. And there was a lot to that, right? I want your input. I want your feedback. But I also want to send a message of your input's important. Your presence here is important. Your participation and your life as a part of this agency is important. And that was not done before. It was very much your number. I don't care who you are. go do your thing, don't cause me trouble, or I'll retaliate against you. So on the surface, that was pretty easy. In the weeds, it was exhausting. It was absolutely exhausting to constantly be on point with this plan. And part of that wasn't as difficult the second time around, because the first time I really felt like there was no room for error. Like I didn't know that I could even give myself grace in this. I thought a misstep would doom not just my command, but it might even doom it would have the unit regress further than what it was. Right? Then it would be, oh, I can't trust that guy either. He's an idiot too. And I hope that's making sense. But the first one, it was very much it was more difficult, simply because I think I put more pressure on myself. The second one was easier because I'd established myself as I had a lot of confidence in my command. I had a lot of confidence in my leadership. I had already kind of been down this road of revamping a culture and a community, and second to that was I knew that community well. Now I was going back to this emergency services unit, and these are operational guys and gals, and I knew that community. That was a community I knew and loved and had grown up in, so I knew what the standards were. I had a commander back in the day that I even still today, he's a good friend of mine. I talk to him often, but there was just a lot of commanders before me that I looked and said, I'm going to steal that from him. I'm going to steal that from him. I'm going to steal that from her. And I put all those into place. So when I got to my second culture healing position, I had a lot more confidence in my abilities. I had a lot more confidence in who I was as a commander and as a human. So, and then I had a lot of confidence in knowing the culture and community as it should be, not as it was. Well, I'm like, we're going back. And I didn't have the luxury of time. We were in the spotlight through a statewide investigation on some things. We ended up firing some people on that going back because they'd really messed up. But I didn't have the luxury of time. So I know this is not part of this came up in the podcast I was speaking of earlier before we got on. We were talking about this, and the quickest way to it's not the most effective way for culture change, but the quickest way is in inflicting pressure and pain. And so I knew that I could initially get a culture change quickly with that. And then I also had to know that was part of my plan. That was going to be my first step. And then step 2 was grace and respect and camaraderie and love. I know we don't talk about love back then, but I do now. That's the essence of what it is loving the partner next to you, loving the person above and below you. And, with that comes this respect of doing your part and being a part of something bigger than you. And so it was initially, it was inflicting some hurt and pressure. I was on a timeline to get things in order pretty fast because that was a gamey one. I kept it out of the newspapers. The event was pretty significant. You can still search it and find it. It's October of 2016, I think. But it was a gamey event and made the newspaper, and I kept it out of the newspaper for 4 months so we could kind of clean up our end of it and make sure that we had a lot of things going our way by the time the media hit, and say, here's what we're doing in response to this, and, those types of things. It wasn't that we're hiding anything. I don't want the listeners to think that. It was just that if that had hit the media at the time, it would have been pure fucking chaos. Sorry, can I cuss on your?
No, we're good. Yeah. So some people will say, and I think you see this in the media now more prevalent because social media is just so fast.
Yeah.
Is everybody thinks that they need to know the information right now. And
right.
That's not always the case.
No.
And so brings me to a question of, you said you had some high performers. I can very much relate in this sense. You had some high performers that, man, if you had to go on target or you had to go to work, hey, I'm taking these guys with me.
Yeah.
But as soon as they got off work, it was like, dude, I'm lost. And I know my background, where I come from, that's not super uncommon. And a lot of it is because those guys feel like they'd rather just be deployed because it gives them a sense of purpose, right? They'd rather just stay at work.
Right.
But when they're off work, they're like, hey, I don't really have a purpose, but I want to get my own spin on this, and I want to hear yours, because the one thing I've learned, and shout out to JC Glick, another guy that we had on the podcast, is it's nobody else's job to give you your purpose, and you have to find that. And you said the quickest way to sometimes to get through to people is inflict pain. And I would ask, with those people that were high performers, because I know, in our community, those people that are high performers, if you inflict some pain and say like, hey, we're moving sharp left, and this is the reason why,
Right.
those people tend to move very quickly because they understand it. And others will typically follow suit because they get it. Is that something similar to what you experienced?
Yes, it is. If I can back up in that before
Yeah.
I'm going to answer this question in a little bit of a long way. The people that we're referencing, I would use this maybe as an illustration. I would take them to battle, but I wouldn't take them home to meet my family.
Oh, yeah. No,
Right?
yeah.
These are people that you want beside them when the heat's on, but when the heat's off, you're a hot mess, bro. So I preface that to say my job, what I learned with my first kind of crazy culture repair was that, and I knew this, but I didn't have the experience with it. Coming into the tactical team on the culture change, I had the experience now of my real job is to build that human up into a human. Not as an operator or as a trooper, as a a law enforcement officer. My real job as a commander is to make you a whole, as much as influence as I could possibly bear, because you can't follow people home. However, as a commander, I really felt strongly that part of my job was to ensure you were doing the right thing at home as well. I had no recourse, obviously, other than just to be an encourager. So that's where you had to win the respect and say, I'm going to do everything in my power to earn your respect and love you into the growth of human that you should be, a great operator and a great dad or husband or, a spouse or a son or, whatever fill in the blank is when you're off. That's part of, I saw that as part of my job as well, is to make them better humans, not just make them better operators. So when I heard my first culture change or repair, I kind of knew that, and that wisdom was imparted on me, but I didn't really have the confidence in knowing what or how I was doing that adequately or even to any kind of prosperity. But the second go around, and arguably it's the third. The first one was an entire culture change repair. It was more of a, anyway, the when I came back to the tactical team to do that repair, I had a lot of confidence in that. I had a lot of understanding of this is where I need to be. And I hope that that's what the chief, the colonel, saw when he picked up the phone and called me and said, I need you back. And I would hope that he saw that in my first culture repair change and said, yep, that's the guy that we need back here. And I keep having this vivid image of coming to you don't do physical harm to your people, but I remember kicking a guy flat in the chest. He was sitting in a lawn chair and he talked back to me. And this was their culture, right? So they were testing me to see how I was going to respond and how I was going to, if I was worth my, everybody had respect for me as an old tag team guy, right?
That only goes so far.
That only goes so far. So part of this is making sure you own that back, and it's inflicting pain and pressure is not the most effective way, but with a bunch of knuckle drag operators who are going to test your mettle, I plan a boot right in his chest one day when he mouthed off to me. And this is not how we're going to play this game. We're going to play it with respect and arguably that doesn't seem very respectful, but at the time, that's what that young man needed. He wasn't respecting me as a commander, and he thought he could get away with something, and he did not. So
we had talked about this before we got on too, about being the old guy, if you will, and the people that are listening, they'll hear ages, right? Your late 30s, early 40s, and man, that's not old. And you're like, you're right. It's not old in the grand scheme of things, but when you play in a young man's game, the people that hang around too long, they start to slip. right? And they
Right.
don't
Right.
realize they're slipping.
Right. Right.
Or, right, or they're going to have respect for you because you've been
Right.
around for a while,
Right.
but they're going to test that melody and be like, this guy's not going to do that. He's an old guy.
Right. 100%.
You know, and when you put it down to say, hey guys, like I might be the old guy around here, but I'm ready to show you, you know, I'm ready to show you the way. At least, you know, where I'm at, people will follow along real quick. You know?
Well, they did pretty quickly. The pain and pressure really for those kind of operational guys, all it did was get them to pause and look up, you know, long enough to say, we got a new guy. Like the culture that we did have is no longer going to work. And then for me, it was a transition to, okay, we're going to build. And one of the things that I did as well that I should give credit to is I brought two guys with me, two assistant commanders with me. Both of them had strong leadership experience, but none of them were a part of the current culture. And I brought those two guys in with me. So there was really nowhere to hide, right? You couldn't spin it and say, oh, the old man's just being a kook, because now I had two, you know, I would say, here's what we're doing. And then my assistant commanders would ensure that it got done. And so that also played into the strategic revamp of that culture. Those two guys I will be forever grateful for those two men coming alongside. And truth be told, there was a lot of spiritual depth to that endeavor as well, as to providing whole-rounded health to that environment, of saying, I want you physically healthy, I want you spiritually healthy, I want you mentally healthy, emotionally healthy, relationally healthy. That's going to make you a better operator, and it's going to make for better decisions out here, both on an operation and more specifically where everybody seemed to be getting into trouble before was off operation, when they had idle time, right? These guys that they're tip of the spear guys, the idle time gets them every time, man. They start, what do they call that? That's the devil's playhouse right there, is when idle time. So that was what was happening. And as a consequence, that first stage didn't last very long. The second phase of it was more about, let's learn how to respect each other. Let's learn how to care about each other, both on and off the job. So is that helpful? Does that answer that question?
No. Yeah, no, 100%. And I wanted to ask to see if these were related. So when you talked about the survivor's guilt, was that early, the first event that happened to you, was that was early in your career before you had
all
these
this
culture? Okay.
Right.
So I guess I'm going to ask a two-parter here. The first one being, first, why, right? And I ask because I share this sentiment still to this day. I've learned to put it in a better place, right? Some will say like, hey, these people died doing what they love doing, but you still can't help to think that, hey, the outcome probably would have been the same, right? But it's always that sense of feeling. So why do you think you carried that survivor's guilt, and how did that help you shape cultures as you went forward to help impact other people?
Oh, that's a great question. The my carrying the survivor guilt was really, well, again, that was 1999. So this kind of thing was not communicated. It was not talked about. There was no conversations around, hey, how you doing? You know, or maybe if there was, it was, hey, how are you doing? Don't you dare tell me. You know, that was the implied message of, so the natural responses, and some of those still linger today, is okay, good, and fine. Those are acceptable answers to that type of question. I'm good. I'm fine. I'm okay. I didn't know anything other than that. I had been raised early on in this. What at that time I had 7 years on. At that time, the I had my first meeting with my supervisor. He knew that I was married at the time. My first meeting with the supervisor, he openly said, this job will get hard. If it gets too hard for you, you have drinking, and you can go find a girlfriend. That was with my break-in partner sitting right beside me. And if it gets too hard, just go and find another girlfriend. Okay, that doesn't make sense. I mean, I'm coming from a farm background. I did no law enforcement understanding prior to that. Okay, fast forward my, 7 years to where we lose Rocky, and I'm a part of this. I'm young, but I am a part of this community, and I was a sniper. That was my position was a sniper on the team, and if I had been there, Rocky'd be alive. That was my thought process. However, years later, when I was in some therapy with this, it was kind of came to the understanding that people's day to die is assigned to them. You were talking about jumping out of airplanes. If today was your day to die, it would have been today jumping out of an airplane. It could be me walking out of my house right here and falling dead from a heart. There's just no telling. That was his day to die. It wasn't because of me. It wasn't because of something I prevented, but that took a long time to actually process and make the head marry up with the heart in that, because I could have an cognitive understanding of that, but it just wasn't resonating and matching up with my soul. So my soul was saying, oh, it's your fault. It's your fault. And my head was saying, Rocky was a good guy. Honor him, give him a thumbs up, have a drink for him every year. And that's the way we do business. But my soul was saying, nope, this is not over. I'm going to burden you with this thought process for a long time. So it took a long time. So, and what was the other part of your question? Sorry, Chad. What was the other part?
No. I had just asked, like, as you were moving through that, the lessons you took away from that.
Oh.
Like you said, hey, you'd kind of bury it. How did you carry that forward when you were building culture and those other organizations?
So
I almost forgot.
Yeah, you did great, because I didn't remember. So with that understanding, I can't actually speak to that second part without including Nikki and I lost 9. There was 9 troopers got killed in my 25 years. I knew all of them. Some of them were close. Some of them, I didn't know as well. But 3 of those were very, very heavy on me. So when Rocky got killed in 99, and then Nikki and Chris later, I knew then, okay, I'm gonna have to do something about that. So specifically related to, I was in a bull. I'll give you a quick story to that. When Chris got killed, he got killed on Thanksgiving Day. He drove into a curved bridge too fast, hit the side, car caught on fire, and he was deceased in that fire. That messed me up, because I was close to that kid. And so that was November. I was a full-time bomb squad member. And February, 4 months later, I got kicked out of the bomb squad because I was yelling and screaming and cussing out the bomb squad commander, a man that I respected very much. But I was standing in front of him, cussing him and berating him I couldn't even tell you what it was about. It was inconsequential, but I was so out of balance that I got kicked out of that unit, full-time unit, and sent back to the field because of how out of balance I was from Chris's death. It took me years to make that connection. I was just upset that I got kicked out of the bomb squad. It took me years to figure out, oh, well, that makes sense. That I was not processing that death correctly. I was not getting help. I was not talking about it. And as a consequence, I had this anger eruption multiple times. And the commander of that bomb squad was like, your services here are no longer needed. Get the fuck out. And deservedly so. If I had been in his place, I would have done the same thing. I wish you the best. I hope you get healthy. This is an operator unit. You're out. And so to answer your question, I would have to put all 3 of those together, and then later have this revelation of, oh, those all have a heavy, heavy, dark impact on you. So when we're talking about this moving forward on culture, that's a part of me that I can't ignore, that I have to say, hey, your mental health means something. the impact of these negative interactions, whether you're losing a partner or watching a baby get killed or holding a guy's hand while he passes over to the other side, whatever it is, whatever. I was recently talking to a firefighter last night, as a matter of fact. We were talking, and he just ran a baby call, and he connected that. It was a 5-year-old. It wasn't a baby, but it was a 5-year-old. And he made that connection with one of his own kids. And he said he was doing compressions, and he said all he could see was his son's face. And that happens all the time. It happens all the time. But what happened in that moment is he got emotionally tied to the call, and now it's messing with him. So now I have the opportunity to have these conversations, say, hey, you need to talk about this. You need to go have a conversation with somebody. So that's the kind of thing that I was bringing to that culture change of, both with the first one that I changed, which is, I had a little fear and trepidation with that one. I had a lot of confidence with the second one, where I could say to these operators, you need to be healthy. And that's not a question. That's me saying you need to get physically, mentally, spiritually, and relationally healthy, and you'll be the best operator you can be. So that's the tie for, kind of bringing this pain and this hurt and the impact of those losses with me. Does that make sense?
No, percent. I want to keep going down this path, but I heard something yesterday, which is kind of going to jump ahead here. But I heard something yesterday, and it was somebody that asked a question to somebody who was formerly in the military, and they said, if you had to go back through buds now, would you make it? And I'm going to ask that question to you, knowing what you know now, right? Hey, if you had to go back through a difficult point back in the department right now in your current state, the answer of this individual was physically, no, unless you paid me like $10 million and I'd figure it out. But his answer was mentally, I would probably crush a lot of these kids because I have a lot more wisdom now and I'm able to impart that on people. Mentally, I'd be able to go through that difficult time. Physically, probably not. Unless you got a lot of cash, and I'll make it happen.
That was verbatim what my answer was going to be. I can't imagine going back through a patrol school, which is modeled after the military's model of restructuring, boot camp. Yeah, and then the pain of going through, the TAC team membership and the all that, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, I would kill it. There's just so many things that I've learned, both through studying and asking questions, but also just from the experience of what's important and what's not, of knowing some things just don't matter. I mean, we pay attention to a lot of things that just don't really matter. Now they matter on some levels, but in the big scheme of things, I mean, it just doesn't matter. Just showing up, to the guys' night out. Does that really matter when you've got a spouse and some kids at home? And they call it the bonding time in law enforcement. They call it choir practice, but it's, it becomes part of the culture. I can't miss. The guys are going, Well, yeah, you can. Yeah, you really can. There are some things that you can go back and look and say, I probably would do that different. I would do that better. There's a lot of things that I would do better. And there's some things that I would obviously, I would not want to lose Rocky, Chris, or Nikki, but I mean, those grew me too. Those made me better. After I figured it out, they didn't make me better at the time, but, today those make me better. So I agree with your friend. Physically, I would not want to entertain that. I went out and ran 4 miles. Dave, I'm trying to get back into running again. I'm getting out of CrossFit and I'm getting back into running again. I went out and ran 4 miles, and today's, for the listeners, today is Thursday. Tuesday I ran 4 miles, and yesterday morning I woke up, my feet were so sore. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't miss this at all. It's just part of aging out. It's just part of your body revolting against, the mind willing it to do something. So I don't know that I would enjoy that at all, but yeah, I agree with your buddy, man.
Yeah, and I can 100% agree with that too. And one of the things that I'm trying to do is pair up with other different organizations and really bring that human performance perspective and change that culture. I would love to do it in a law enforcement and EMS type setting of break the culture of, hey, it's okay. Hey,
Right.
go drink or find a girlfriend. Because you're right, knowing what you know now, looking back, if you had to go back now in your current state and look at people, you're gonna be, hey guys, nobody's gonna remember this guy's night out. Like,
Right.
nobody gives a shit. You might, because you think it's the biggest thing today to
Right.
happen. Like getting healthy, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, being strong with your family. Because it makes me think of that thing you just said with the firefighter. How do you? The one thing I really want to get into, and I love what you're doing, and I want to get into it too when you're talking about being a police week, but getting in with those people, and how do you work through trauma before it happens, while it's happening, and after it happens. So when you show up and you're providing compressions to a kid and you see your kid's face there, you have mentally prepared. So it just doesn't go in your bag and you're like, well, I'll deal with it later and I'll have a drink.
Right.
Like, because it's never going to end up good. It
Right.
never ends up well.
Right. No,
You know?
100%. That, so if I can speak to that specific conversation from last night, I'll start there. One of the things that I acknowledged with him in that moment as he was sharing was, hey man, I'm really proud of you for speaking this. Just you talking about it lessens the impact. Every time you tell it, it lessens the impact. Data proves this. We can talk about crisis intervention work. We can talk about therapeutic work, but data proves the more you have a conversation about the hard thing that's impacted you, the less impact it has on you as a human. So the more you talk about it, and we get into the whole, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to regurgitate it. I don't want to bring it up. However, if we use a very loose term called stuck, that trauma can actually get stuck in the anatomy. I'm sure you and most of your listeners know this, but the anatomy of this is it gets stuck in our amygdala, which is the fight or flight portion of our brain, which is why EMDR works as well as it does, because EMDR takes it from the amygdala and puts it into the prefrontal cortex, the correct memory. For the listeners, I use a file cabinet metaphor. So to go back to the firefighter last night, let's say his memory is a file cabinet, and he's got, tons of memories all from childhood to current. Some things are great, some things are not so great, some things are good memories, some things are horrible memories, but all of them are filed away to where he can recall them correctly, or most of them. This call that he's talking about, where he overlaid this 5-year-old with his own son, that was going to become a file that laid sideways on the file drawer, and he wasn't going to close the file drawer. And what that looks like on a daily basis is drinking, pornography, cheating on your spouse, some type of substance use, anger issues, digestive issues, cardiac issues, and that's short and long term. And we see it all the time. I'm sure you see it in your community. We see it in our community all the time. Of substance use is alcohol. Alcohol is the most acceptable. You can't tell me not to drink, because
it's literally everywhere. It's
literally
everywhere.
right? And you see it on TV all the time. I love the show Blue Bloods, but almost every frame they're having a whiskey, right? They're Irish whiskey drinkers, and the model then is, hey, if you have a hard day, just go have a hard drink. And I did that. That's part of my story, and we'll get to that in a minute. But this model of turning to something else, of anything that hits a dopamine hit, drinking or pornography or sex or gambling, it's endless. Gaming is one of the most current. Gaming, I talked to a guy recently who was wanting to help. He was gaming 12 to 14 hours a day. Like, holy shit, dude. When do you have time to go to work? And what's your marriage look like? Those are some hard questions. So this framework of this mental, or this metal filing cabinet, this memory gets laid crossways and the file drawer can't close. So EMDR moves it from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex. So it would be like picking that file up and putting it correctly in the file folder so you can close the file drawer. So now you're sleeping better, and your digestive system's better, and your cognitive thinking is better, and your Rational thinking is better. You're making wiser decisions. Does it make it go away? No. Does the pain still there? On some levels. Does it still hurt? Yes, but you're working through it. Arguably, well, not arguably, data shows that a lot of law enforcement veterans and firemen, first responders, their resiliency is higher, both through training and just as a result of who they are as humans, that their resiliency is already higher. So the data is there for law enforcement, so they're in and into that, but it doesn't marry up with the PTSD, right? The resiliency is higher, but the PTSD rates in law enforcement and military are much higher compared to the average public. So that number doesn't correlate. So that means we're doing something wrong. Gordon Graham says if it's predictable, it's preventable. We see it. So now we need to do something about it. And as a consequence, that's why we have conversations like this with, you and I sitting here having these conversations. So with specific to this young man I said, I'm really proud of you for having just this little moment of courage to raise your hand and say, hey, I had a bad one and I'd really like to get it off my chest. Because more oftentimes than not, guys are saying any number of narratives in their head. I don't want to talk about it or bring it up, or if I talk about it, it's going to make me look or appear weak, and I can't in this community. Or if I talk about it, it's going to bring it true for the next time. I mean, all kinds of different crazy narratives that we tell lies, arguably, that we tell ourselves to not raise our hand and have that conversation. And I think the true win is having these conversations with somebody out there listening and say, you know what, maybe I should talk to Chad. Maybe I should call Chad up and talk to him and tell him about this crazy thing that is in there. We like to minimize it, right? We minimize it and say it's not that big, just like I did with Rocky. It's not that big a deal. I don't have the right to say that. All the same internal narrative that I was saying are the things that I'm talking about now. Just don't bring it up. It'll go away. I got to power through this. I'll go work out harder. I'll go drink a little more. I'll go find a girlfriend. Look at some pornography. And it doesn't. That's they're all lies. They're all lies.
So why? I'm interested to go down this. Why do you think, especially for the people listening, do you think it turns in to chasing that dopamine, such as, the things that you mentioned? Why does it turn down that, from what you've seen? And I arguably, right, like, yeah, I'm tied to the military community and stuff, and I'm not saying that, people aren't exposed to a lot of things, but I have a huge heart for the law enforcement community because more times than not, even if you serve at very high levels in the military, your exposure, there are micro traumas, right? You're doing micro traumas, blasts, and all these other things, but you're really exposed to a lot of like traumatic things when you're gone. Versus law enforcement, where it's 4 days a week, 5 days a week, and you just park your patrol car and head home.
Yeah, we there's a variety of studies that you can kind of look at and say in comparison, and this really isn't about comparing. The communities all have their own weight that they bear, but specifically for law enforcement or fire and emergency, but the first responder community, it's called chronic. So it's chronic stress. This is something that you're living day in, day out for 20, 25, 30, sometimes 40 years. And when your bucket's full, your bucket's full. So what your bucket's full of, it's going to gush out. And I use the illustration of life has a funny way of squeezing your bucket every once in a while. Let's just say, heaven forbid, I don't want to shut on anybody, but the reality is cancer is real. Let's say for a second you have cancer. You get diagnosed with cancer. Well, that bucket gets squeezed. So what's in the bucket's coming out. So if you haven't put good stuff in the bucket or dug out some of the old junk and put good stuff in it, that bad stuff's coming out. So when it's squeezed, that what's in your bucket's coming out. So I think to answer your question, I think within these respective communities, I think the dopamine is such an easy, quick, by perception, not reality, but by perception, there's something going on inside of me that I don't know what it is, but I know drinking will hit it or having sex will hit it, or looking at pornography or gambling or gaming will get a dopamine. So just for that moment of time, I can hit a dopamine hit. And I'm not a clinician, so I'm not an expert in this,
Yeah.
but I've been around the block in this a little bit. The problem is, you your the dopamine hits, like any drug, just start to lessen. So you're going to require more engagements with whatever you're dabbling in to hit the dopamine. So, drinking's a funny thing too, because I don't think we should miss the opportunity here to talk about using alcohol to sleep either. So not just out partying with the boys and hit the dopamine hit there, but going home, which is that was part of my shortcoming in that and some of my life trials and tribulations. But I was using alcohol to sleep. And the reality is, the more alcohol you drink, the less sleep you get with that. So, sometimes it's just an excuse to disengage from life and isolate and really remove yourself from that whatever is burdening you, a call or a stress or a trauma or, a pinch that you're in. Maybe you got yourself in an IA, it's just, okay, so drink it away. And, so I think from to answer your dopamine question, I hope I answered that, kind of round that out. I think there's a variety of excuses that we use to seek the dopamine instead of using the altruistic method of, you know what, you want to go jump out of a plane, then go knock yourself out. There's really nothing wrong with that. There is something wrong with cheating on your partner to hit the dopamine. There's some significant, and most people see that as very black and white. But when you're fuzzy and you got these files not filed correctly, you're not thinking straight. Matter of fact, you're thinking from your amygdala fight or flight framework of your brain. If I could be bold and kind of use another illustration here that's pretty oversimplified. If you think about the concept of your brain in regards to a bodyguard, the amygdala is the bodyguard, and the protectee is your being, your essence of who you are. And the bodyguard is the amygdala, which is the hits the fight or flight. So at any moment, the bodyguard can take over. It has full right to hit the disconnect on everything else and say, I'm in charge. Every time. So when you're out of balance with these traumas, the bodyguard's hitting the takeover button all the time. The bodyguard's just taking over. And you're making some really irrational, unproductive decisions because the protectee, who's the smartest one in the room, who should be making the decisions, who should be actually being the most productive member, is not. He or she is being forced to sit on the sidelines while the bodyguard's over there doing stupid shit because you're in this fight or flight stage. And in order to get the bodyguard to settle down, you need to talk through it. Sometimes you need therapy. Sometimes you need EMDR. Sometimes sometimes you need a treatment. You need a 30-day or 45-day stay at a treatment facility just to get that bodyguard offline and say, you're safe. Stop. You're safe. You're okay. But for some, the bodyguard takes over even in their own home. They're like, I'm not safe here. I don't feel safe, so I'm going to drink or I'm going to do something stupid. Right? Does that help? Am I making sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great segue to go into talking about how your alcoholism started.
Yeah. So I really felt through the latter part of my career, I was a bourbon sipper. I enjoyed bourbon and really enjoyed. And when I retired, part of my story is I built a nonprofit business myself that was a peer support based organization. We did CISM training and CISM response. So I would send instructors. I had about 50 some plus odd contractors that worked for me all over the United States that I could call up and say, I need you to go teach this, or I need you to go to respond to an event. A great example that I use a lot is St. Louis. A friend of mine at St. Louis PD called and said, we just had a blue on blue death. A partner ran over his other partner and killed him in a pursuit. It was a bad, very tragic circumstance. But their peer support team quickly became overwhelmed. So my organization, for what I do, I called a few people and I said, I need 6 people in St. Louis. And I had, by the time I was done, from the time I got the call to the time I had people on the ground was 48 hours. I had 6 people on the ground in St. Louis in 48 hours, which is pretty impressive from
Yeah.
pulling people from all over the United States. That's the kind of stuff we were doing. So I, I had started building that in 2016 and I retired in 2018 to run it full time. We were doing great work. When I retired, I was a bourbon sipper and life just started beating me up. I used the illustration a while ago of squeezing your bucket. Well, that's what happened to me. I would love to blame some things, but you really can't blame anything. Life just gets really hard and fucked up sometimes. And that's what happened to me, to my ex-wife and I. We just had some really, really ugly things happen that we had no ability to respond to. So as a consequence, I just started drinking more. I started drinking more. It was a bad decision on my part. But I was building a new business and the essence of who I was just maxed out. And instead of drinking, a 2-finger, began drinking, a fourth of the bottle and then a third of the bottle and then a half a bottle. And by the time 2021, coming out of COVID, that was a really bad time for nonprofits. So now I had financial issues, I had life issues, and my drinking was out of hand. I ended up going to Chateau, the place that I work for. They called me a couple years after and said, "Hey, would you come work for us?" I'm like, "Yes, I believe in everything you do. I will do. I'll work for you," which is why I work for them today. I'm fast forwarding ahead, but I went to Chateau, and when I got back, they had one of the things that I think is really important in this part of the conversation is what happened at Chateau. There was some moral injury that happened as a course of my career that I didn't realize it even happened. I mean, I understood that the events that happened, but I didn't realize the internal conflict that had gone on. Now, bear in mind at this point, I had seen some therapists and I'd gotten EMDR and I'd gotten some trauma realigned straight, but my beliefs and values were just a little askewed. They were a little bit off, and in conflict with some of the things that I had done and experienced or done and lived out myself, performed, were a violation to some of my internal values and beliefs. And what Chateau did was help me realign that and either forgive the situation or forgive myself and help understand how to give myself grace in those spaces to live a life of peace. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Am I okay.
100%.
Okay. So the drinking, it wasn't just drinking that I went to Chateau. I mean, my PTSD was now in full blown flare by the time 2020, end of the beginning of 21. PTSD and PTSD I think it's a good plug here. You probably talked about this before, but PTSD is a manageable diagnosis. It's for most, it's a manageable diagnosis. The key word in that is managed. And I was not managing it. I was letting it manage me. Within, some of my behaviors were really bad. I was acting out. I was making some pretty poor decisions. Not anything crazy. I was trying to keep my marriage together. I was trying to keep my life together. And life just was coming at me. It's a long story, but it was just, the essence of it is I was just really unlucky. I'd love to be able to point the finger at something or someone and say, "You did this to me," but it wasn't that. It was more of just, we were getting kicked around, my ex and I, and go to Chateau, level some things out. So, then when I come back from Chateau, well, actually, no, while I was this is where the betrayal starts to happen. Okay. And I talked about that before, and this is an important message. And when I talk about this, I want to preface it and say, this is a story of hope and healing and forgiveness. But you can't make up the shit that I experienced. So the guy that I had built a team around me with this nonprofit organization, and they wanted nothing to do with me when they found out, and I kept the drinking hidden. Okay. I was a good trooper. I didn't drink when I was teaching. I didn't drink when I was speaking. But, when at night I was drinking a lot and the PTSD flare up. And so while I was at Chateau, they got my board together that I built. They got my board together and conspired to have me fired. Now, this is a peer support organization who's supposed to take care of its own and help people who are having a hard time, which I was having, and they had me fired. And then these people that I had worked with, I'm able to humanize them now, but we'll go into that a little bit more here in just a little bit. I'm able to understand why they made the decisions they made and how they did it. I don't agree with it. I think it's very egregious, but I understand it. So when I came back from that treatment, I had done a lot of healing, but I went to a really dark place because then it was the cold hard realization. And by the way, it should also be said, my ex-wife was also an employee there. The board, independent of my decision, chose to hire her because she wasn't working. And they said, well, she goes up there and helps you out a lot. Let's give her a position as well. And they fired her as well. It was a shitty deal. So both of us had been removed. That if there was ever any chance that my marriage was going to work, that was the nail in the coffin when they fired, because she brought that up every day. It's your fault. You're the reason. I've never been fired of a day in my life from any organization until now. So this really took me to a really dark place. And I'd had thoughts of suicide within my career in some of these dark moments, but in those about 30 some odd, 20 some odd days after Chateau, and the cold hard realization that I had not only been abandoned and betrayed, but they had called members of the law enforcement and firefighter community in the state of Oklahoma and told these people to have nothing to do with me or my ex-wife. So they alienated us and abandoned us, which is a form of betrayal. And I went into a really dark place. I even reached out to them and said, I'm hurting here. I know enough about this to know I'm thinking about putting a gun in my mouth and I need to reach out. So I reached out to them and said, for whatever we did or didn't do together, surely you care enough about this to respond. Crickets. They wanted nothing to do with me. So God, the great thing is the veteran community in Oklahoma took me in. So there was a retired major with the Army that I had connected with, who basically wrapped his arms around me and said, come to us. And I went to a PTSD group every week where it was all veterans. And it was all PTSD, recovering PTSD, recovering alcohol members of this community. But in my darkest hour, here's the and I'm gonna give a shout out to my friend Travis. He's a Marine in PTSD and alcohol recovery. In my darkest moment, literally, I was probably hours, days, if not hours away from taking my life. He calls me and he says, hey, how you doing? I said, man, I'm not doing worth a damn. I'm not doing good at all. He said, I'll be by in 10 minutes. One of the coolest things that still to this day it's ever happened in my life. He came by my house. We sat here and had a conversation. And he said, what are you doing for this? And I said, well, I was hoping I'd have, the opportunity to connect with this organization that I built, and they want nothing to do with me. And he said, we're going to AA. Now, up to that point, it's important. This is an important part of the story, not just my story, but a lot who are drinkers in the law enforcement community. Getting a cop in the rooms of AA is a miracle in and of itself. You're just not going to see, and there's a lot of stigma and internal narratives that you say, I'm not going to sit across from a guy that I've arrested and say I'm an alcoholic as well. So you just getting a cop in an AA room. And at that point I was willing to latch on to any thread that was going to be thrown to me. And I went to AA, and I love telling this story. We're coming out of COVID, so they weren't even supposed to be meeting. And there were 7 guys in there, and those 7 guys hadn't seen a new AA member in a long time. So they were on me like white on rice, man. Out of those 7 guys, 5 of them were felons. 4 of them had served hard time. and they couldn't give two shits that I was a cop. They're like, come on in, man. We got you. We'll take care of you. And that's what they did. They loved me. I worked the program of AA. AA created a miracle in me. And this is the true essence of my marriage. My story is that my marriage was doomed at that point. She was like, deuces, I'm out of here. And so I was just one by one, I was losing this and that. It's just a compilation of losses. I'd lost my community, I'd lost my friends, I'd lost my job, I'd lost my income, I'd lost different set of circumstances, but we had to sell a home of 19 years that I absolutely loved. I didn't agree with that sale. That's what my ex-wife wanted to do. I mean, it was just a compilation of these losses, and I was in so much pain and hurt that AA said, we don't care about any of that. We care that you get healthy. And I dove into the program of AA. And Chad, I cannot speak highly enough of what that program can do for any listeners out there that want to change their life. AA will do it. Find a good sponsor, dive into it. There was a miracle that happened in me working the steps of AA, and it was a miracle of forgiveness. When I arrived to steps, the middle portion of those steps, forgiveness was imparted on me by God. God granted me the ability to forgive, almost irritatingly so. Like when it happened, I remember thinking, wow, I don't have this anger towards them. And it kind of pissed me off. No, that's my security blanket. Like I want to hate them, I want to, but I couldn't, because God's like, at that point I was working really hard in this. And God said, if you're going to do this, then we're going to do this all the way. And by the way, I'm going to take that from you. So I now have the ability, and that was steps 4 and 5 specifically. And then what AA is most known for is step 9, which is the amends step, where you go and the book is specific about, it does not matter how much they've harmed you. More oftentimes than not, they've probably harmed you worse than you've harmed them. Doesn't matter. You still have to make this amends of saying, I want to ask your forgiveness for my part that I played in this to be disruptive to my peace. So I did that. And any of the members of that organization that picked up the phone, I did the amends, and I had peace in it. And that's the true point of this story, is that working this program, if you're an alcohol drinker and you define yourself as an alcoholic, this is what the program will do, or can do, if you work it, because it shaped a miracle in my life. And I have, International Association of Chiefs of Police is a big organization, and within it, they say, administrative betrayal, and we've all seen it, maybe even experienced it. Administrative betrayal is an act of cowardice. And within that, I was able to understand, okay, this is who they are and this is what they did. I wish them the best. I hope they have great lives. I never want to be a part of them again. I took myself completely out of wellness. I took myself completely out of this community for about 2 years. And then I get a phone call and just kind of doing my thing, healing, getting right. And one of the guys at Chateau calls me up and says, hey, we'd like to hire you. And would you be interested in doing training and business development for Chateau? And I'm like, oh my goodness. There was a lot of fear and trepidation with that, because I'm coming back to a community that there was some lies dispensed about me. They told people that I had stolen money. They had told people never to talk to me again. I mean, there was a lot to this. There's a lot more to the story. But so when I came back to the community, I had some fear and trepidation with coming back. How was I going to be received, and how am I going to overcome some of this? But the reality is I just surrendered. Part of the AA credo is surrender. The true essence of AA is surrendering your will to God's will. And I just surrendered that and said, if this is where you want me, then, I'm on board. You're going to have to open those doors, because I'm broken. I'm just a broken human. And it has been, since I've hired on with Chateau, it has been absolutely staggering to me to see the opportunities that God has placed me in to make an impact on people's life, not just with drinking, but drinking is one of them. Today I had a doctor's appointment on just a kind of a checkup thing, and I'm having a casual conversation about my alcoholism, and the nurse there says, she started crying, and she said, I can't get my husband to quit drinking. I said, tell me more. I just have these really God moments where I have the opportunity to to impact and share my story or portions of my story, not because, I want to air dirty laundry or get back at them. That's not what this is about. This is about a story of pain and darkness that transitions into healing and hope. And as a consequence, I do a lot of suicide intervention conversations. I do a lot of, let's get healthy from drinking conversations, a lot of spiritual conversations that God has given me that opportunity. So I don't dwell on, what they did. I don't dwell on the acts of cowards. I focus and surrender my time to what God lays in front of me and say, what was the movie, the military movie where the guy said, the Lord, just send me one more. Give me strength for one more. He was the medic that.
Harper.
Yes.
Was it?
No, it was. Anyway, I'm at a loss. That's my old man memory.
Hacksaw Ridge.
Hacksaw Ridge. He
there
says,
it is.
Lord, give me strength to get one more. Right. And I think, give me the strength to just visit with one more guy, just like the firefighter last night, just like the nurse today. I have these opportunities to have conversations now with people that are it just brings me a lot of joy. And that's a humble joy. It's not me that does this. It's not me that makes all this happen. It's not me out there, my fanfare or my ego. This is about surrendering to God's will and being present and being in the right position and being bold enough and courageous enough to tell my story is really not that pleasant to tell often. I don't like talking about, I was a drunk, or I acted out of my PTSD. Those are not pleasurable. But I tell that story to know, or to say, there's probably somebody listening, or maybe gets shared with somebody. Say, hey, you need to listen to this because this one sounds like you. Could be a spouse. Send it to another spouse and say, you this could be you, or this is you. And I'm not afraid to share my phone number, 405-245-5139. Man, if you want a phone call me up, send me a text. I'd be happy to have that conversation of just what peace, serenity, and hope tangibly look, feel, and taste like.
I mean, that's...
Because I've been through some shit.
Nobody think, I don't want to say nobody, a lot of people think that their story is not glamorous, but you're 100% right in what it says. And I think that's why we line up so well, right? Like even just the name of like this organization is like, it's not, your story is what made you who you are. You don't want to change the things that happen. You wish you could change some small things, but then you wouldn't be who you are today. Right. But what you do with your story after it and how you're going to impact that nurse and that firefighter is, so important. And I want to ask you a question now is, what would you tell people that are just graduating the police academy now, or a highway patrol academy, getting into law enforcement? What is some advice you would give them about what you've learned along your journey?
Oh man, that is a great question. And this is not the first time that I've been asked that, but I would say, go have fun, go stay grounded, and make sure that you're loyal to the proper things in your life. And that includes yourself. We were just talking before we started the podcast on this distorted loyalty. I think I think part of it is the training that we encumber. Look, I'm not against training. I think there's a reason that we train out the emotional element of who we are. There's a reason for that. You can't have a guy falling down, I'm sad, crying in the middle of a mission. You just can't have it. It's unacceptable. Now, post mission, let's do it. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about how sad and hurtful and how much pain there was involved in this particular incident or crisis or whatever, fill in the blank. That would be my message, is that having that conversation after, that's being loyal to yourself. That's being true to yourself. That's being honest with yourself and saying, this one hit me hard. Within our community, and I know the veteran community is the same, the law enforcement, firefighter, EMS, we get into this comparative game of trauma. Well, it didn't impact Chad, so it shouldn't impact me. But the reality is, just like that firefighter, Chad didn't make the connection, but that firefighter, let's call him Sam. Sam made that connection with his son. Well, it's obviously going to hit him harder. But if he looks up and does a comparison to it, a trauma comparison, well, it doesn't affect Chad, so it shouldn't affect me. Well, Chad doesn't have a 5-year-old. Chad didn't make that connect. He wasn't where you were at. So it's a dangerous game we play of this internal narrative of not being loyal to ourselves and speaking up and saying, but yeah, that would be my advice and has been. Have fun, be honest with yourself, be loyal to yourself, and make sure you're very grounded. Be where your feet are.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't answer that any better. It's spot on, like I think this is a perfect opportunity now, though. I didn't mention at the beginning that you have created, we talked about how I was a guest, very fortunate to be on your guys' podcast, but we didn't get a chance to talk about what it is or the awesome name that you have created for it, which is No One Fights Alone. And if you take a minute and tell everybody about it and like where they can find it, and because there's so many awesome episodes I've been catching up on, and it's just so many of those stories are similar, but they all resonate, right? Because somebody's living your story.
For sure. And as many stories as we can get out there, because they're all uniquely different, but as many stories as we get out there, I get a lot of calls from guys and ladies that say, and that one hit me, or that one spoke to me. Just while I was at Police Week, I got a phone call from a guy in Seattle. He's like, man, I just got off the podcast on this one, and it was exactly what I needed to hear. Like I was struggling, and it gave me hope, and it gave me direction. That's why we do what we do. So the name of the podcast is No One Fights Alone. You can find us on website, NOFA, NOFA podcast.com, NOFApodcast.com. You can find us on all the regular podcast carrier, Apple and Spotify. But No One Fights Alone podcast. And I would love to take credit for it, Chad, but it's not my build. So a guy named Austin Pedersen, who is our executive director, it's his brainchild. He started it actually before I even onboarded. But when they onboarded me, they gave me an opportunity because clearly I don't mind talking. They're like, hey, we want you to be a part of this. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Just like I said at the beginning, I don't say no. Like, hey, that looks like a neat opportunity. It doesn't bother me. Let's try this out and see if we can take a swing at it and make it go. Or if we mess it up, then we just back up and do something else, But to date, we have been really successful at just being consistent with some really cool stories of just getting people on, just like yourself. Come on, tell your story, tell what you're passionate about. There was a podcast. I'm going to throw creds out to now that I run the podcast mostly now. So there's when I kind of transitioned to being the kind of the person doing the background on all the podcasts, there was a podcast many years ago. I think it's still in existence, but they've changed the kind of the dynamic of it. But there was a podcast called Team Never Quit, and it was Marcus Luttrell, David Rutherford, and there was a third guy. He never gave up his name, but his nickname was I can't remember his nickname. Man, Chad, those early on podcasts of Team Never Quit, phenomenal. And the model was have a guest on and then drill down to where your never quit moment was. Where was that moment where you finally had to make a conscious decision? I'm not giving up. And you had these amazing stories. Well, really, I model a little bit after that. Tell us your story, and then tell us where the dark place hit and how did you get out of it? What did you do? And what are you passionate about? Those kind of things. So we've had some phenomenal guests on, and I just love, you're one of them. We've just been fortunate to people and now we're having this, as you said at the beginning, we're having this kind of overlap in social media where people are reaching out and, hey, let's trade podcasts. And you formulate this really cool community of, Beyond the Trek doing great work, and No One Fights Alone is making an impact. And I'm still blown away. I mean, we're from Washington, D.C. to L.A., from Seattle to Miami. I'm blown away at the responses sometimes that come in and say, hey, that was a good one. And in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, or, wherever. Man, just this, and this is a God thing. This is not a bad thing. This is a God thing, to where God's using this to his benefit and his glory and to his impact, to, maybe it causes people to pause in that really dark moment and say, yeah, there's another option out here besides, sucking on the end of a gun, or drinking myself silly, or cheating on my spouse, or, something that just pumps the brakes long enough to say, okay, maybe there's something different that I could be doing. So that's the true essence of the No One Fights Alone podcast, is that you're not alone. There are many other people who are maybe in it with you right now, or have been in it before you. And that's why I tell my story. There's a lot of people out there that are either in or have experienced administrative betrayal, and they're still in the pain of it. I just have mine was a lot of hard work, man. Mine coming out of my betrayal, it was a lot of hard work, internal hard work. And there's a lot of those out there. Matter of fact, the guy I referenced, the military guy that took me in, his retired major with the Army, his is a story of betrayal of the military. Booted him out. Just a lot of wrongful things. And how fortunate was it of me to encounter that guy and say, he's like, he did. As a matter of fact, he laughed. I told him the story. He laughed. He said, yeah, me too. Like, no, you don't understand. He said, yeah, I do. And that's the position I'm in. I see you, man. It's okay, which is the essence of No One Fights Alone podcast. Now, I think also, I'm going to kind of be bold here and expand this. Chateau Health and Wellness is a residential treatment facility located in Midway, Utah. We cater to the first responder and veteran community. And No One Fights Alone podcast is sponsored by Chateau. That's not to fill beds. It's not to sell a product. No One Fights Alone podcast is a true standalone. Let's get the word out. Let's do as much as we reasonably possible can influence to share these stories. And I'm thankful every day that Chateau sees fit to, because they don't make money. Well, residually, maybe they may get clients from it, but that's not the intent and purpose of it. It's definitely a very far end collateral issue if they do. The real meat and potatoes and the real mission of No One Fights Alone podcast is just that. You're not alone. You're not by yourself. So that's it.
That's awesome. And Brad, I just want to say thank you so much for honestly telling the story. And I'm excited to share this with everybody. And I'm excited to see how we can continue to help you guys, help Chateau, and just really just continue to make an impact. So thank you again.
No, thank you for having me, Chad. And I love what you're doing. And man, you're killing it. Keep going. Your message is amazing. And for those listeners that haven't, jump on over to our podcast and listen to Chad and I's conversation there. It's his side of the story, which was really awesome. It was really cool. So thanks, man.
Thanks, Brad. I appreciate it.
You bet.